morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, and welcome to Black Table Talk Daring Dialogue Special Edition for Women's History Month. Technically, we are not yet back in our new season, but what we have been doing is we have been coming live on Mondays for the month of March because we wanted to make sure that we were still celebrating through live stream and our podcast, celebrating Women's History Month. So, just a couple of quick announcements before we get into our last reading for the month. We are going to be resuming our broadcast. We'll be resuming our full-time podcast, Daring Dialogues, beginning April 20th. And so if you want to keep up daily with what's happening, you can go to our Facebook page. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can go to our Facebook page, Black Table Talk, where for the month of April, we are going to be kicking it into another gear. We are celebrating Afrocentric April and Afrofuturist April when it comes to Black history, when it comes to learning more. So if you want to hang out with us for the month of April on our Facebook page, you're going to see more entries that have to do with art. You're going to see more entries that have to do with what does it mean to be Afrofuturistic. And then you will also see us talking about the origins the origins of some of the West African art. So that will be what we will focus in on and feature on our page, Black Table Talk on Facebook. Good morning. Good morning. To those of you who will be joining us back at our podcast, we're going to be resuming our regular podcast readings and also keeping in mind that April is also Poetry Month. April is also Black Women's History Month. So we are going to continue sharing with you Black women out of history that we believe that you should know. Some of them you might know already. Some of them, like we have been doing this month, you might be introduced to for the first time. All right. That being said, I often tend to get a different crowd when I'm doing a live stream broadcast than I do with my regular just posts on my page. But I want to say this because whether you're watching live stream or whether you are just reading my posts, I think it's important for me to reiterate that Black people are the authority on their lived experience. And I think people should rehearse that in their minds until it sinks in. Black people are the authority on their lived experience. So when we come online and we're sharing with you about our lived experience, right? We don't need a well actually there. We don't need you diverting attention from what we're trying to tell you about our lived experience. And I notice that non-melanated, or let me say less melanated people, are having a problem with understanding that. Black people are the authority on their lived experience. I don't need you trying to reason away what happened to me. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's problematic. I don't need you talking over what I'm trying to tell you about what happened to me or my friends or the other Black women that I'm talking to who are experiencing some things. I will say I'm a lot more generous and graceful than a lot of other Black content creators who would just cuss you out and block you. I don't do that. I give you an opportunity to course correct, right? And then when I see that you don't want to course correct, then I block you. Because one more time, Black people are the authority on their lived experience. It's not to say other experiences are not happening. And here's the other thing. If Black people are talking about enslavement, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which were essentially created to enfranchise Black people in this country, then we don't need you dropping in to tell us about the Holocaust. There are pages for that. Uh-huh. We want you to stay on topic. I know. It's an uncomfortable topic to talk about. We get that. You think it's not a thing where we're excited to just talk about this stuff all the time. But the reality is some of this has not been resolved because our country refuses to hold themselves up to the mirror. And so when you enter into a Black space, just understand that we're going to be talking about things that pertain to Black people. It literally says that in the name of my Facebook page, Black Table Talk. Now I didn't know that this was hard to comprehend, but if you're on a page with Black in the title, chances are you're going to hear things on the page pertaining to Black people. Now, I do some posts that anybody can answer. I just did one early this morning about Jim Crow etiquette and some of the things that we were taught as children that we were taught was respect, but it was actually part of it is actually Jim Crow etiquette. So I put out a poll and I say, hey, how many of you have heard any of these things or have been taught any of these things? I didn't say Black people only. So I have more than Black people that are commenting on that post. But there are some posts where Black people are simply expressing their experience. And there are still people who feel it necessary to try to either make themselves the authority on our experiences or they try to will actually our experiences. And it's just not necessary. All right. So as we wrap up for this month, I want to bring us back to one of the books that we were reading. And that book is called Without Fear. If you're a person who loves books, who loves reading, who loves learning new things, this is what we do here. We read and we read aloud. Yeah, I love it. I appreciate when people say, hey, I'm driving and I come through and I listen in the morning times on my drive through. My hands get to be free. I just put my phone in the seat and I just listen to you read and discuss. That's what we do here. And we like to read mainly nonfiction. There are some pages that focus in on fiction books. We like to read nonfiction. We like to read Black authors. We like to read authors of color. We like to read women authors. We like to read well researched authors. We like to read. I like big books and I cannot lie. All right. So if you enjoy that, then you will probably enjoy being with us when our podcast resumes on April 20th. I will say that our podcast will only air on Mondays on Black Table Talk. All other days of the week, it does air on our YouTube channel. Somebody said, well, why don't you simulcast all week long? Number one, if I simulcast it all week long here on Facebook, I wouldn't be able to talk about some of the things I talk about on YouTube because of Facebook's algorithmic controls. There are certain things that I talk about that I would be getting flagged for, and Facebook would probably shut my page down because that's what they do. So I only live stream on Facebook one day a week on Mondays. If you want to catch us the rest of the week, beginning April 20th, you can meet us at our YouTube page. And that information will be down here once the live stream is up, but you can also find it on our other posts. All right, so let's go to, we are in the chapter called Without Fear, Universal, Natural, and Equal Rights. And we will continue reading this book through the month of April because April is also Black Women's History Month. We're talking about this woman behind me. She is one of my inspirations. And let me show my person there. She is one of my inspirations. Her name is Ida B. Wells. Some of you have actually heard of her, and some of you might not have. If you are a Black American, I don't necessarily want to assume that you've heard of Ida B. Wells, but she is one of, I would say, my inspirations for the work that I do, both online and also offline. This is going to talk to us about the motivations behind Ida's work. It's going to talk about how she got into the work that she got into, and hopefully you will learn something about her that maybe you have not heard before. Around 1892, after the brutal killings of her friends in Memphis pushed her to expose the horrors of lynching, right? So again, Ida doesn't get into this work. Yes, Ida doesn't get into this work because she enjoys going around reporting about what is happening to Black people in the South, mainly. It was happening other places, okay? But it was the brutal unalivings of her friends in Memphis that pushed her to expose the horrors of lynching. Ida B. Wells decided to head to Great Britain, presenting her statistical data on lynching based on her meticulous research. And I remember being younger trying to search for this research because I had heard about it, but it was like out of print, out of publication at the time when I was searching for it. And that research was called the Red Record. And it was her data that she was compiling of these cases that she was doing journalistic investigation on. And she was finding out that, wait a minute, these people say that this is why they were unalive, but this is what actually happened. And she realized that she not only needed to collect this data, but that she needed to start getting the information outside of the United States. Now, why would we say this? Because we see what's happening to our current regime, right? We see what's happening in real time. We see how they are taking our history out of museums, or they're rewriting the plaques in museums and then returning them, right? We see how they're removing information off websites and thinking that no one will notice. And then they're only putting it back when somebody notices and says something about it. So, because of this issue of not having information properly being shown, the misrepresentation that was happening to the people who were being unalived, right? Because also, when we talk about reparations, and I say this quite a bit, reparations should also be coming from media because they were complicit a lot of times in this spread of this false information, in the spread of the false misrepresentation, in the spread of the lies about these people that were being unalived. They were part of the issue. Mhm. So when we talk reparations, they should be included in that conversation as well, for the material misrepresentation of the people that were being harmed, unalived. Wells went to Great Britain using her research to debunk claims that Black people were lynched because of criminal activities or that Black men were lynched in droves because they were guilty of assaulting white women. She went to go present this in another country. And that's important to note. Instead, she argued that it was a tool that pseudo supremacists used to prevent the social advancement of Black people in the aftermath of enslavement. Now, how do I know this to be true? Because a part of my family's lived experience was my great grandfather multiple times having to go outside his home and his 40-acre farm and stand to the edge of the road with his shotgun when the Klan would do these raids through different towns. They would come through with a whole truck full of people doing raids on towns and attacking Black landowners, of which my great grandfather was one of them. And he had to teach all of his 12 children, my great aunts and great uncles, how to shoot. And they came up with a plan. Now, how do I have this knowledge? I have this knowledge from my direct ancestor, my great aunts, who chose to share their story and pass it on to me as a descendant. And as somebody who would be coming after them to continue to take care of the land. Okay? And so, yeah, they were doing that. And I have firsthand testimony from my great aunts, which tells you that wasn't that long ago. My great aunts are 85 and 90 years old, respectively. And in their 20s, in their teens, they were being taught how to protect our land from those people. All right. So, yes, this was very much a real thing that was happening. They were coming in and they were trying to intimidate Black landowners and Black farmers. They were trying to intimidate people out of their land. They figured if they raided or if they continually did this kind of activity, that it would make the landowners fearful of being attacked. So they would just pack up and leave their land so that they could claim it. So sometimes it wasn't always a violent encounter. Sometimes it was just these continual raids through the community. And some people said, you know what? I'm not going to wait for them to do me harm. I'm just going to pack up and leave. And a lot of land, especially in the Deep South, a lot of land was forfeited through that process of Black people just getting up and leaving town, and then that land being taken over. All right. So we need to understand that. And if you're asking the name of the name of the book is called Without Fear, Black Women and the Making of Human Rights by Keisha N. Blaine. So it's powerful to me because I can read this, but I also have a living history, an oral tradition, a lived experience record from my great aunts. So when someone asks, how in 2026 does your family still have land in a town that our family is one of the only Black landowners in the whole town? That's why. Because I had a great grandfather who said, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stand our ground and we're going to defend our rights to own this land that we paid for. That wasn't given to them. All right. So it's very important that sometimes as we're reading and we're reading the history, we can start matching that history with our lived experience, with our oral history, with our descendants' experience. And yes, I'm recording them as they are sharing with me so that we have future documentation. All right. So Ida B. Wells argued that lynching was a tool that they would use to prevent the social advancement of Black people in the aftermath of enslavement. Truth is mighty, she pointed out, and the lynching record discloses the hypocrisy of the lyncher as well as his crime. Federal intervention was at the heart of Wells' political advocacy. She knew that other strategies to combat lynching, such as political agitation and mass protests, mattered little without federal protection. And this is where people get upset when Black people tell you why we're not doing certain things in this season, in this hour, because we've been on this rodeo before. Going back to listening to what Black people are telling you about their lived experience in this country, she knew that other strategies to combat this, such as political agitation and mass protests, mattered little without federal protection. Which is why on day one of somebody's regime, because I can't call it a presidency really, I can't call it administration, on day one of the regime, what did they start doing? They started releasing executive orders, removing federal protections. They started closing civil rights divisions. And I wrote about this several times on my page. You can go look for it. And I told people the reason they're starting with civil rights protections first is because when the abuses start happening, you're not going to have a place to report the abuses to. So whether that's in employment, whether that's in school with discrimination, with your children, if they're shuttering civil rights divisions, you're not going to have a place to report. You will not be offered federal protection, which is why now some states are having to step up and they're having to add in protections because at the federal level, those things are being eroded. Now, whether they will return in the next administration, one can only guess. But we do know right now, those protections are being eroded. Her earliest writings on lynching underscored this point. It would continue in American society for as long as federal officials looked the other way. And where are we right now? We are at the federal officials looking the other way point of history. The emphasis on federal legislation was a practical matter. As Wells would later point out in a Red Record, even in cases where white vigilantes were arrested and charged with lynching at the local level, they were easily acquitted by a jury of their peers. She passionately argued it was the federal government that must give to the individual citizen under the stars and stripes the same measure of protection which it gives to him when he travels in foreign lands. So she understood that it wasn't just the state and the local that needed to address things, it was also the federal. By invoking foreign lands, Wells called attention to the government's role to protect its citizens when abroad, meaning they certainly should receive protection when on American soil. Again, lived experience. Why did we see so many of our brilliant Black artists and creatives going off to Paris and living there, sometimes until their death, like Nina Simone? Because why were they getting more protection on foreign soil than they were on American soil? These were very real things that Black people in America had to deal with and decide. Although I will say in this iteration of America, they are making it harder for you to be able to, number one, leave the country, and number two, be able to land in a country that they are not interfering with. I think the count is up to what, 7 or 8 countries now that we have started a conflict with at the same time. So a lot of places that people would have said, I want to go to this country, they're not going because now we have started a conflict with those countries. So again, that's cutting off your ability, right, to go and be someplace else. I find that interesting when people say, go to another country. Well, our country is now starting conflicts with other countries at the same time. So where are we going? Where are we going? In 1893, shortly after the lynching of Henry Smith, a black laborer in Paris, Texas, British reformers Catherine Impey and Elizabeth Fyvie Mayo came together to establish the Society for the Recognition of the Brotherhood of Man to combat American racial prejudice and violence. Membership in the society was limited to those who embraced the ideals of freedom, equal opportunity, and brotherly consideration. So when we talk about coalition building, how am I going to build a coalition with people who don't believe in the same things I believe about human rights? There are a lot of people that are saying, well, we just need to come together. Well, we have to come together around shared values about human rights. Do you believe in freedom for everybody or just freedom for your four and no more? That's an important question. When you talk about coalition building, do you believe in equal opportunity for everyone, regardless of gender, race, orientation, status, marital designation? Do you believe in equal opportunity for everyone? Because we have an administration that said, um, we've got to right the ship because we feel like these people over here were given too much opportunity. When in fact, the opportunities that were given were in fact to right the ship. So now we're throwing all of that overboard, and now more opportunity is being given to people who have already and always had opportunity. It is not lost on us, if you look at the data, that 300,000 Black women lost their jobs. And essentially, when we say lost, we're really talking about were let go from their jobs or fired. 300,000 Black women were fired, but then 365,000 white males were added in the same period. They're not the ones with the high unemployment rate. But this is what happened when you have people that come in who are now trying to invert justice. In the context of 19th century Britain, the society functioned as a critical space in which activists could advocate for human rights. Impey and Mayo were already well established in British and American reform circles. So she didn't go over there, right? She did not go to another country trying to rewrite the script. She found people that she could build a coalition with who were already a part of reform circles. In 1888, Impey, a Quaker from Somerset, had published Anti-Caste, Britain's first anti-racist magazine. Mayo, a Scottish widow and writer, had been an active supporter of Indian rights. In an effort to build an international following and raise greater awareness of race relations in the United States, the two women extended invitations to several African American leaders, including Wells and the New York-based journalist and activist T. Thomas Fortune. During Wells' first trip to Britain, which began on April 21st, 1893, and lasted for 6 weeks, she delivered several speeches about American race relations. At a May gathering in London, she debunked the idea that, quote, the prejudice against the colored race has passed away. Isn't that interesting? In 1893, they were saying that prejudice against Black people had just passed away. Here we are in 2026. It hasn't passed away, but we still have people making the claim that it has. To the contrary, she told British listeners of the myriad ways African Americans were treated as second-class citizens, speaking of the indignities Black people faced under the system of Jim Crow and sharing that she had been forcibly removed from the ladies' car of a train several years before. Because, yes, um, Ida B. Wells also had her moment of being removed from a train car because she refused to give up her seat. After her talks, Wells reminded her listeners why she had traveled abroad, especially of the fact that British views of African Americans might educate white Southerners who saw themselves as above her people. Employing religion, Wells framed lynchings as unchristian. And to her listeners' surprise, she also spoke candidly about its barbarity when such discussions were usually guarded. The mob, she argued, are no longer content with shooting and hanging, but burning Negroes alive. And so, again, the importance of someone like Ida B. Wells is the fact that she was documenting what was happening. She wasn't just letting her documentation stay within the United States. She was moving outside of the United States to build soil. Her work is incredible in the fact that she would have been doing this not with the help of publicity. She would have been doing this not with the advent of television. Photography itself at this point was maybe 60 years old. So she would have been doing it um, and making her way and trying to publicize what was going on largely on her own. And so when we say Ida B. Wells as an icon, as a inspiration for somebody who was getting the job done, not only this was just one part of her work. While Wells' graphic details about lynchings unsettled many people, she delivered these lectures to raise awareness of racial violence and help place international pressure on the United States to respond. It was a Black woman that was doing this to place international pressure on the United States. And here we are in 2026. The international community, the United Nations, has finally, for the first time, declared that what happened to Black people through the transatlantic slave trade was one of the gravest crimes committed in humanity. We have Ida B. Wells to thank for some of that groundwork, for what we are receiving the acknowledgement of this year. While touring Britain, Wells published a pamphlet, United States Atrocities, Lynch Law, a reprint of her well-known treatise, Southern Horrors, for British audiences. S.J. Celestine Edwards, a West Indian Methodist preacher in Britain, wrote the pamphlet's introduction. Released in May 1893, the Society distributed the work to influential British leaders of the period. By early May, the tour was overshadowed by a conflict between Impey and Mayos, and Wells was asked to take sides. 2 weeks into her tour, Impey had proposed marriage to George Ferdinands, a mixed-race dentist who was a young protege of Mayo's. And though he had not accepted the proposal, Mayo was greatly displeased by Impey's actions. She demanded that Impey leave the group and that Wells disassociate herself from Impey. Wells tried to stay out of the conflict, but could not escape it, even financially. Mayo refused to pay for Wells' expenses in retaliation for Wells's refusal to denounce Impey. In the absence of full financial support from her benefactors, Wells received enough assistance from Edwards to tour for only 6 weeks, and so this first trip came to a sudden halt. And here, and here is the lesson on coalition building. that Black people often find themselves repeating is that when you start building these coalitions and other people have other interests that don't connect and coincide with yours, or there is personal conflict and infighting, suddenly the mission gets derailed because she was depending on these two white women to assist her with the finances to continue the tour. Because they fell out with each other, now her tour is cut short. I'm going to just let that lesson sit right there for those who need it. That September, Wells received an invitation from the Society, now under Edwards, to return to Great Britain. But by the time Wells arrived in March 1894, Edwards had fallen gravely ill while the feuding between Mayo and Impey continued as vehemently as before. Determined to continue her tour, Wells reached out to Reverend Charles Aked, a white preacher from Liverpool who helped her craft her own schedule. Because now I've got to separate what I'm doing from your internal conflicts. Employing his connections and the promised endorsement of famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass, she delivered a series of urgent lectures decrying lynching as a crime against humanity. What is striking about Wells' writings and speeches during this period is her careful attempt to situate her campaign within a larger effort to advance human rights. She called attention to how white mob violence ran counter to the rights of people on the basis of their humanity. Her ability to broaden the scope of the issue captured the attention of her international audience, as was the case in May 1894, when Wells spoke before a crowd at the Eccleston Square Congregational Church in London. Immediately following her speech, attendees passed a resolution that underscored the activist message. That this congregation, they said, desires to express its strong condemnation of those who practice or approve such inhumanity, and expresses the hope that the Christian people of America will take such steps as shall speedily stop the cruelty and injustice by giving the Negro a fair trial before punishing him for any crime with which he may be charged. So her advocacy, her continuing on, her willing to do this tour, her willing to find other coalition builders, her willing to find other avenues of financial support is what continued to spur her on. She had to keep going, not only in the face of injustice, but she kept going in the face of people getting, as we would say in 2026, lost in the sauce. Bravo, Ida B. Wells. Let's see, we've got 2 more pages to read. Another visit to Hope Street Church in Liverpool, pastored by Reverend Richard Ackland Armstrong, followed suit. In the aftermath of Wells' visit in April 1894, the church members similarly denounced lynchings in the United States and pledged to help bring an end to the practice, justifying their stance in the name of our common humanity and as lovers of justice, of freedom, and of brotherhood. Wells' speeches resonated with many, but she also faced question from those in the United States on why I come abroad to tell of the racist grievances and if more good might not be done in America. She explained that she would if the same opportunity were afforded us to be heard, but we as a race cannot get a hearing in the United States. And the reality is we're sort of moving back into that mindset that people do not want to have these grievances expressed. They don't want America to be held accountable. They don't want it to be taught in schools. They don't want the books available in libraries. We're moving back into this mindset of where people do not want to hear us out. She said, I would be happy to do this in the United States. But Ida B. Wells said, We're not even getting the opportunity to be heard in the United States. So that's why I'm here. Wells was aware that placing the horrors of lynching before a British audience no doubt pressured the United States, hoping that it would ensure that sentiments will be aroused and laws enacted which will put a stop to an American disgrace. Employing a practice long used by American activists, Wells attempted to shame her country by drawing comparisons to other nations. As she would later explain, we refuse to believe this country, so powerful to defend its citizens abroad, is unable to protect its citizens at home. Italy and China have been indemnified by this government for the lynching of their citizens. We ask that the government do as much for its own. So, yeah, this idea of um, America looking at other countries and talking about how terrible they are while doing the same thing to their own citizens, that's not new. They were doing it in Ida B. Wells' time. They were pointing the finger at Italy and China, not Russia, but Italy and China, and saying, look at what Italy and China is doing to its citizens. And Ida B. Wells said, um, I call, you know, I call hypocrisy. You want to talk about what Italy and China is doing, but you don't want to talk about what you all are allowing to go on in the American South. Mhm. Wells' speeches during this period capture how human rights often framed Black women's political vision. She strategically wove in specific details of lynchings to appeal to the empathy of her audience while adopting the language of human rights and emphasizing the dignity of all people and their need for international protection. That's right. That didn't start with Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. In 1894 in Bristol, Wells pointed out the terrible complacency of American leaders. In 1894, here we are in 2026, and we still have complacent American leaders. She said, everybody in authority from the President of the United States down had declared their inability to do anything. Sound familiar? She went on to quote Sir Edward Russell, editor of the Liverpool Daily Post, who had emphasized the importance of great nations shaming each other. She added, if the South would throw as much energy into an effort to secure justice to the Negro as she has in expending in preventing him to obtain it all these years, the problem would soon be solved. Wells transformed the way many of the British public understood lynching. On April 25th, 1894, the Baptist Union passed an anti-lynching resolution, and a month later, Samuel J. Barrows, editor of the Christian Register, publicly endorsed her campaign. What was her campaign? A campaign against lynching. By the summer, she had obtained the support of several influential groups in Britain, including the British and Foreign Unitarian Association, the British Women's Temperance Association, and the Aborigines Protection Society. Her speeches and writing across Britain compelled audiences to respond. By crossing national borders in the mid 1890s, Wells articulated the importance of not only forging transnational networks, but the need to view racist violence as far more than just a national offense. Her travels abroad opened a critical space to move from rhetoric to action and helped others better understand how the developments taking place in the United States were a global concern. By the end of her tour in July 1894, Wells had delivered more than 100 speeches across Britain, and several groups had endorsed her message through the passage of anti-lynching resolutions. So when people say, well, why are you doing all this talking? When people say, well, why are you having this conversation with this group over here? When people say, I don't understand why you have to give this lecture, or I don't understand why you have to write about this. Why are you always talking about this? Because it is beyond a national concern. It's human rights that are being violated. While the immediate audience of Wells' lectures were British citizens, the speeches also circulated widely among British subjects in the Caribbean and other parts of the globe. By the time Wells returned to the United States, her anti-lynching campaign had garnered significant attention. While her trip and reporting sparked some controversy, she secured many new supporters, both abroad and in the United States. These developments, as well as the long list of resolutions that followed her speeches, only offer a glimpse into how she showed lynching to be a weapon that was being wielded by white Americans to keep Black Americans in their place through fear. Her efforts, combined with the political work of a cadre of Black women, reinforced a message that would reverberate in the decades to follow: that racist violence directed toward Black people was a violation of universal rights and contradicted the very essence of human dignity. Making this case did more than just tug at the heartstrings. It articulated the human rights nature of the problem, as well as its urgency. This crisis prompted Wells to demand a response from President William McKinley in 1898. Although her demands fell on deaf ears, they did serve another purpose. Her powerful words helped to spur on a new generation of Black activists and intellectuals who would build on her work in the years to follow. And so, again, again, freedom, as Dr. or as Coretta Scott King said, freedom has to be won every generation. Are you going to get all of your demands met? You might not, but you're laying a foundation for the next generation to build upon your work. If you never do the work, what is there to build upon? Just ask yourself that. And so ask yourself today, what is your work? What is the work that you know that you're supposed to be doing in this moment and in this hour? I know what my work is. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I understand right now that the literacy rate in America is in the trash bin. So maybe I can't reach every illiterate person in America, but you know what I can do? You know what I can do? I can pull out the books that they need to know about and read from them out loud. Because maybe when they see these words, they get a little bit nervous. They get a little bit shy about reading. They get confused. Maybe they have dyslexia and they struggle with reading long form text. And so somebody may come in here and say, "Oh my God, there's that Black girl again. There's that Black girl up there with that book in her hand reading. What is she doing reading on camera? We don't want to see that." That means this is not for you, right? There's plenty of things I stroll by and scroll by on social media that is live that I recognize is not for me. But the people that is for, it will be here for them to find. All right. And then somebody else will come build on my work because I've been doing this since 2016. And I can tell you in 2016, there were almost zero read aloud podcasts. But in 2026, there are hundreds now of read aloud podcasts where people are doing exactly what I'm doing that I was doing in 2016 when people were like, is this possible? Is this doable? Can we pull up a book and just read from it? Can we be a live, living audio book for other people? Can we help people get through reading lots of books by the end of the year just by joining us in conversation and discussion. That was the question in 2016. In 2026, there's no question about that. Now we have podcast book clubs. All right. And so a part of my work for my generation, for the people that will hear, is to get information out in a way that people can receive it. They might not ever go into a bookstore. They might not ever go into a library. So I'm bringing it to them. All right. So I understand what my work is. Um, and I hope that you understand what your work is too. This is part of my work. The other part of my work is training teachers so that we have more teachers that are equipped and feel confident to teach the next generation. Another part of my work is helping students with reading and math and standardized testing and SATs and ACTs. That's a part of my work. Another part of my work is creating, writing, painting, drawing, singing, producing music. So I have several parts of my work that I'm working. And this is only a glimpse into the work that I do. That's all. Another part of my work is just sometimes making people smile or laugh or adding a bit of wordplay humor to their life. And so some people, that's the part of me and the part of my work that they see and receive. So my encouragement to you today on this Mindset Monday is to not be deterred in your work. Everybody is not going to get your work, and that's okay. I often tell people, I am not everybody's cup of tea, and I don't try to be. I'm coffee. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I am coffee. Yeah. So do what is in your power to do. Do what's in your talent to do. Do what's in your gift to do. Do what's in your skill set to do. And as Martin Luther King said, whatever you choose to do, be the best that you can be about it. Even if you are the garbage collector and that is your thing. Do you know how important the role is of a garbage collector? Let your trash not be picked up for about 3 weeks and see how you feel about the importance of garbage collecting. Garbage collectors, they get to go through communities, they get to go through neighborhoods, and a conscientious garbage collector can tell you a lot about a neighborhood. Mhm. They can. They can be eyes and ears in ways that you can't be because they're in your community in the early parts of the morning, seeing and watching, not just picking up trash. Some of those garbage collectors can be praying over your community and praying for your safety. So, whatever you find your hands to do it with all your might, do it to the best of your ability. All right, let's read some comments here. Good morning. I want to say good morning, Penny Stanley, over on our Facebook page. I appreciate you coming on live and making the connection here live. And good morning, Leslie. Good morning. Um, what I'm saying is so true. GE students taught me about this when I taught the class. Yes, yes. Um, that reading out loud piece is also helpful just in increasing literacy in general. Sometimes people need to hear the words to be able to help with pronunciation. There's a lot of words. I mean, I've been teaching 26 years. There's still words that I'm learning the correct pronunciation to, and I've been teaching for 26 years because sometimes I've read it and I've assumed that this was the pronunciation, but then I go and I click on the, I search it and I click on the audio for it, and look at how it's supposed to sound. And I realized, oh, I've been pronouncing this word wrong. And some have lost their sight. Exactly. So we're trying to make, a part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make reading and literacy more accessible to more people. And I get it. Some people are not going to understand that, and that's okay. Then that means that this podcast is not for you. We've also brought authors on to this podcast to introduce their books. As a matter of fact, I have one coming up in May. Very important work. He's going to be joining us in May to talk about his writing. So if you are an author and you're interested in having an opportunity to bring your book to the forefront, you can email me at thedaringdialogues, all one word, thedaringdialogues with an S, at gmail.com. You're interested in coming on for a book talk. Pastor Ben says, I so often point to the hypocrisy of our nation. Lord says, this is our country. And I hope that our is inclusive of the people who live here. Muhammad says, you still talking about that book? Muhammad must have come in and out and came back and saw I was still talking about this book. I find that to be funny. All right. Breaking down the barriers you see and lifting up those who can be able is making real change. Thank you. Thank you. And so I often laugh to myself and I say, this is the unsexy work. It is. Now, if I was reading this work in just my underwear, right, I'd probably get thousands of people coming in. They'd be watching to see what underwear I had on, and they'd be probably watching and making comments about my body. But I'm not reading this for attention. I'm reading this because I think it's important. And so this is the unsexy work that I'm called to, guys. All right. I'm not a IG model or Instagram influencer, none of that, okay? I don't have anything sexual to offer you over here. I have some books for the sapiosexuals. Now, sapiosexuals love this kind of stuff. But that other stuff, I don't have it to offer you, okay? So if you have a short attention span, do what the person did. They stepped out, they came back in, they stepped out, came back in, and you can always catch the replay, right? And you can pause where you need to pause and come back to it. I also want to bring your attention to some other really good podcasters that is out here. One of them is The Contraband Camp, and that is hosted by Michael Harriot. He's the author of Black AF History. Excellent, excellent podcast, The Contraband Camp. He typically breaks down a concept, and he is a great storyteller in terms of breaking down the history on things. So if you want to check him out, I highly recommend. What's the other young lady? Tabitha Speaks. Tabitha Speaks is on YouTube. I have not seen her on Facebook, but she is on YouTube and she talks about politics and she breaks down politics on YouTube. Another fantastic podcaster. Who else do I listen to? Sunny Day Jones. Her name is spelled SUNNYDAE Jones, Sunny Day Jones. She is on Facebook. I think she's also on TikTok, but I'm not on there anymore. But you can and having a conversation about important things. All right, so those are just some that I want to quickly mention before we today. This has been our special edition for Women's History Month. I hope that you have enjoyed us coming through on Mondays in the month of March. I will warn my Facebook audience that these videos for the month of March will eventually be wiped out because Facebook wipes out videos after 30 days. That's another reason why I do not host my full podcast on Facebook, because they delete critical documentation. And so this video is also being simulcast on YouTube. So you'll be able to come back and find it on YouTube if you ever want to look for it again. Um, and that's that. And so again, we'll be taking a station break from podcasting. We're going to return April 20th, and it will be back to our Monday through Friday schedule. We are moving our time up now to 10 o'clock. So you will not have to bounce back and forth between whether it's 10 o'clock or whether it's 12 o'clock. All days will be 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time across the board. So you know that you can come here and read along with us. This has been another episode, and I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to evil. So go out and be light. Take care, everyone. Be well, and most importantly, be light. You deserve